Hello everybody, it's me again from Barcelona Technology School. On this opportunity, I would like to share with you some fragments of some really interesting talks that took place here in Barcelona last week in the IoT Solutions World Congress 2016. However, before going straight to that videos, I would also like to share with you which are, in my opinion, the most important points on these talks. The first most important point to know about IoT, and it doesn't matter if you are really deep or not in IoT industry, is that IoT is actually changing and impacting almost every industry in the world: energy, logistics, manufacturing, business, and also healthcare. The second most important point is that IoT is a platform of platform. Okay, what means this? Maybe this is more a concept for developers, but means that you don't need to develop by yourself a whole new platform. What you can do is actually using one of the other platforms' existence in the cloud if you really want to develop a new solution. The third most important point is that currently IoT just reached a 1% of the whole possibilities of impacting, so there is much more coming in the future. The fourth most important point is about healthcare industry. Healthcare industry is having a great impact by means of IoT. However, there are also huge challenges to need to be sorted out if we really want to see how IoT is going to transform healthcare industry. And the final point, but not the least important, is that implementing IoT in different industries will return an improvement in people's lifestyle. So that means that everybody in this world are going to have more benefits by means of Internet of Things. So that is. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and from now I'm going to share with you what I promised at the beginning of the video, the fragments of these really interesting talks. If you want to jump directly to one topic in particular, just look at the comment area, search which one is the one you're most interested in, and go directly there.
At doing this at a faster speed, and the only way that you're able to do this is through actually harvesting along the process. So maybe the first application that took a lot more time, because in addition to creating the application and that business domain logic, we spent a lot of time creating the core components, making that interoperable. The second time we did it, we had more things to harvest upon, so we're faster. And then each time we get faster and faster, and each time we can focus more and more on what's special to my domain. And so you might be thinking, well, I'm never going to create a platform. I'm not big enough. I'm going to use someone else's platform. I would say this matters to you even more. So what we're really headed towards, IoT is really around a platform of platforms. So if you don't have a platform right now, it's not so bad. Right? GE's building one, Schneider's building one, Philips is building one. What you're likely to have is an ecosystem. They all mention ecosystem. So what does that mean? I would argue that just like internet, you might not own the content. It might not be your content at all, but it's your ability to discover content, the ability to package it together and to reuse it. So if you think about a platform of platforms, let's take an example from the picture here. You might have someone like a Philips. So Philips, they're a medical device company. So that medical device, because they control the thing at the edge, the device data, as it goes into their full platform, they can guarantee that entire lineage from when that device takes a measurement until when it's in the platform. So this qualifies as medical grade. That means that you can make medical decisions on that data. This is different than your Fitbit and your wellness. You never know. I might give my Fitbit to somebody else, and somebody else might run around with it, or it might be malfunctioning. The question
is actually very different if you look at it from a European perspective, where you have mobile and broadband, and where you would think actually that things are connected. Now, if you look at the holistic IoT potential, the answer is most likely not. Because today we really only connect 1% of the potential of the world. And the question for me today is, how do we go at connecting the over 99% that we have? So today we are actually pretty good at connecting cars, at driving telematic services in your cars, at providing infotainments, at providing e-calls for the automotive industry. We're also doing a lot of work for the utilities, where we deliver connectivity and solutions for the smart meters. We work with a lot of different verticals to actually help them do remote management. But still, this is very, very narrow when you look at the entire possibility. Think about the Internet of Nanothings. Think about the role of bio-nanothings. Think about what the Internet of Things really is. Think about narrowband IoT and how you can transform Internet of Things into Internet of Everything. The potential is huge, and what we've done really today is just scratch the surface. Now, the government in the US has been investing $22 billion over the last few years into nanotechnology, and with a goal to basically drive the different use cases in the market and the adoption. And that means many different things from a defense perspective, but also from a healthcare, for instance. Think about having real-time health diagnosis wherever you are in the world. But that is for the future. Let me try to focus a bit more on what we see in Vodafone IoT and where we think the market is actually going. What about IoT starting to dictate some of the day-to-day behavior that we have? All of us needs to go and buy some clothes, or at least I believe. And how is IoT actually going to influence our behavior in the future? What about having hangers with counters embedded into them, which gives you the number of people that have actually liked the design of a specific clothes? You can imagine that all of us would actually go on the website, on the social media networks, and decide whether we like this or not. And when you go to the shop, basically, you have a chance to either buy something that everybody likes, to be part of a social group, or actually look to be a bit different. Let me give you another example that Vodafone has been working on over the last year or so. We had a customer that came to us in Ireland, and Niall Austin is a farmer. And Niall's challenge is the following. He's been losing a lot of cows and calves because he was unable to basically assist them when they were giving birth. So what Niall really needed is a way to actually predict how and when the cow would actually give birth and get the data so that he could basically go and assist the cow. So after a number of months of R&D, Niall, Vodafone and a number of partners in the hardware have come up with what we call the MooCall. And what the MooCall is a fairly simple device which you mount onto the tail of the cow, and by measuring how the cow and the tail is actually behaving, you have the ability to actually predict when the cow is actually going to give birth. And so that device basically measures 600 data points by seconds to actually start to understand what the behavior of the cow is. So if you couple that with features like geofencing, suddenly you have the ability to understand how the cow actually is doing and understand where it is. And then using Vodafone network to actually get the data onto your phone and then trigger the whole process to actually assist the cow. But let's hear from the customer himself.
I grew up on a farm. My dad grew up on this farm, and his dad was on the farm. So, I don't know any different than to be on a farm and looking after livestock and cattle. I love it. When I was 10 years of age, my dad had me out handling cows, calves, just learning different things.
These guys are very attached to their animals, they care for them, and obviously the loss of a calf, or even in some cases a cow, can be significant emotionally as well as financially to the farmer. The idea behind MooCall was to offer a solution to farmers that was affordable and would take down mortality rates significantly. A cow's tail will move a specific way in labour. We have a very sophisticated algorithm that counts the contractions and ultimately sends a text message to the farmer approximately 1 hour before the calf is due to be born. Once we proved the concept that MooCall actually could predict a calving for a farmer, the next solution we needed was how we were going to get that information to the farmer, and that's where Vodafone came in. Quite simply, the device will now, through the IoT platform provided by Vodafone, send a text message directly to the farmer. There's no limit to the distance between our device and where the customer is. Vodafone give us a roaming capability to get our signal out in all signal situations. The MooCall gives a lot of benefits to the farmer. One, obviously, is he's going to save a calf generally once or twice a year with our device, because he's there to assist in a calving if necessary. They go to sleep soundly with the knowledge that we will come and wake them when the calving event is happening. So, along with saving calves, which is very important, these guys get a lifestyle change where they have so much more time for themselves.
It gives you great peace of mind. If I think there's something wrong when I'm away, I can ring my dad and he can come down and check them, if he's not on the farm. Everybody will lose them one, whether they say it or don't say it, we've all done it, and I hate it. I absolutely detest losing that calf. MooCall to me is the same as one calf's life. One calf it'll pay for itself in a year.
We're 13,000 sensors sold to date in 30 different countries, 9 different distribution agreements in countries in Europe, and just about to sign a big one in America. In every case so far, Vodafone has had an IoT platform in those jurisdictions that give us full coverage, so it makes our globalization of MooCall seamless. And I'm very happy with what we've achieved, because we've obviously put a solution to the market which has given everyone a real peace of mind on the farm.
By bringing the right thing at the right time to improve efficiency. So there are 5 ways. Healthcare is huge. All the Fortune 500 has some part that they're working in healthcare, and each has its different part. As you walk around the floor, and people involved with healthcare, you'll find their own niches of how they're trying to make an improvement. But we at Schneider Electric and people in our space around the facility end of things are making improvements in 5 areas. The first is improve financial performance, energy efficiency, support staff efficiency, and a little bit on the flow. Secondly, to improve the patient experience. When you're sitting there in your room, to try to, we won't have time to give you all the details here, to improve the experience you have in your room with mobile applications, to improve the efficiency of the staff, which is the most expensive part of a hospital, to improve patient satisfaction, and finally to reinforce security, because all the problems of society come into a hospital, and there's unfortunately a need for security.
I've seen thousands of births in my time. Each one I treat as special, and I always keep a watchful eye. I can't decide their futures, but I can give them a better chance at life. Amidst all the calm and the chaos, I need to be alert and switched on all the time. I can't make mistakes. I'm equipped for whatever's next, making sure there are no distractions and everyone's focused on the job. That's how I save lives. I believe comfort is the best way to recovery. I'm there if you need me to keep you warm at night. Close your curtains or turn on your lights. And with lives at stake, I have to be everywhere. That's why I am always connected, on call 24/7 wherever I may be. I have the power to predict and help you make critical decisions. Spend or save, cut back or go green. My knowledge can be your guide. I'm a smart investor and a steward of sustainability. Your healthcare guardian for future generations. I am your hospital. I'm powered by Schneider Electric. Innovation at every level.
Canada, Panama, people adoption of wearables in the workplace, and then I'm going to talk about the direction we're heading innovation-wise, bringing the Internet of Things together. These 5 areas are critical areas for adoption of a wearable. The first is a trigger of behavior. So an example of this could be you've been sitting all day or sitting for an hour, actually getting a trigger to get up and move, do 3 minutes of activity. The second one is around feedback. So absolutely knowing that I'm hitting my goal for the day, but letting me know how I'm progressing towards that goal as the day goes along, so I don't have to do all my steps or exercise minutes at the end of the day. The third one is around progress. I want to be able to look at the wearable and see how I'm tracking towards all those data goals that I have. The fourth one is as a benchmark. So this is really important. Wearables have different levels of accuracy, but one thing that's really important there is when I start using the wearable, I have a starting benchmark as to how I'm doing at that point in time. And I can see that at a future point in time to see how effective the wearable is and effective the program is tied to that wearable. And the last thing here is to leverage a social network. We all have a social network, whether that's friends, colleagues, and or family. Leverage that for motivation and encouragement through the wearable. And that's really important. I have my wearable on, I want to get that motivation. Perhaps a friend of mine has just passed me on a leaderboard. This is a really interesting stat. And looking at this graph here, when we talk about wearables, yes, there's a wrist worn, there's ones that clip on, there's clothing. This entire industry is growing. And if you follow any of the clothing wearables, that whole industry, being able to wear clothing and track my data, extremely important. This is the first step as an employer to have wearables used by my workforce. And not only does it have to be something that I want to wear, something that looks good, perhaps has different color schemes, has different form factors, something, perhaps you don't want to wear a wrist factor, you want to clip something or put it in your pocket, or wear a piece of clothing. But the other side of this is our clients have different environments. And we have clients in a manufacturing environment where you can't have smartphones, you can't have wrist-worn devices for security, for safety issues, for manufacturing flow in case that item fell into the process. So these wearables, future wearables, needs to account for different employers, different types of workplaces, and different preferences by individuals. That quote there, that's probably the most important thing. We've seen studies that wearables in their own right don't have the long distance as expected. Individuals will wear the wearables and stop using them after a short amount of time. You need more than simply having a good-looking device and tracking that data. And these 6 key areas are important to the future wearables, to making individuals use wearables for long, sustained engagement. The first part of that is programming. A wearable by itself will not have someone keep using that wearable over a long period of time. You need programming. You need content. You need engaging games with that. You need challenges. You need a program tied to the wearable. Simply tracking my data is not a long-term successful piece for the wearables. The second one is rewards. Whether this is financial, perhaps a points game, maybe even trophies and badges, you need some sort of reward program around the use of the wearable to have that long-term engagement. The third is around personalization. So I spoke in the previous slide about different form factors, having a form factor that caters to me and the environment as well, but this takes it a step further. My display on the device needs to be personalized. I need to be able to show what I want to see on there. I need to be able to track different data points and be able to say how I'm going to track that. And the final piece of that is I need to be able to personalize my notifications. Perhaps I want to get notified every 10% of my goal. Others may want to know just simply when I hit that goal and as I exceed it. That's the personalization piece. The next is gamification. It's something really near to my heart. Having this fun, gamified experience, whether it's leaderboards and a challenge with my social network or having something more than that. Recently this whole VR flow with Pokemon mundane task and making sure I'm hitting my steps and exercise minutes and tracking my weight, but actually having some sort of fun challenge in there or game. The fifth one is social motivation. Again, can't stress the importance of social networks and leveraging these social networks to motivate you as an individual. And wearables can do that by having encouragement from my social network and seeing leaderboards and seeing how I'm doing. And the final piece there, maybe the most important, is make it so that there are insights on that. And I mentioned that before. We're all familiar with the quantified self movement. It's continuing to grow. People are body hacking themselves to see what is the effect of the data and how to improve their health. As we move forward, as this Internet of Things continues to grow, absolutely do we need to integrate with all these sources of data, but more importantly, we need to give enlightenment to the individual on what that data is. As an example, I'm tracking my weight, sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Those are areas I need to improve. But what is the one area that I could have the most effect? As I'm looking at my data and trying different things, I don't get enough sleep by far. Maybe an extra hour of sleep is the most important. I don't know that. A system that could tell me, look at all your data and give me direction as to what's the most important thing. It's from Canada, from Panama, England. All right. So what I want to talk about here is adoption of wearables in the workplace, and then I want to talk about the direction we're heading innovation-wise, bringing the Internet of Things together. These 5 areas are critical areas for adoption of a wearable. The first is a trigger of behavior. So an example of this could be you've been sitting all day or sitting for an hour, actually getting a trigger to get up and move, do 3 minutes of activity. The second one is around feedback. So absolutely knowing that I'm hitting my goal for the day, but letting me know how I'm progressing towards that goal as the day goes along, so I don't have to do all my steps or exercise minutes at the end of the day. The third one is around progress. I want to be able to look at the wearable and see how I'm tracking towards all those data goals that I have. The fourth one is as a benchmark. So this is really important. Wearables have different levels of accuracy, but one thing that's really important there is when I start using the wearable, I have a starting benchmark as to how I'm doing at that point in time. And I can see that at a future point in time to see how effective the wearable is and effective the program is tied to that wearable. And the last thing here is to leverage a social network. We all have a social network, whether that's friends, colleagues, and or family. Leverage that for motivation and encouragement through the wearable. And that's really important. I have my wearable on. I want to get that motivation. Perhaps a friend of mine has just passed me on a leaderboard. This is a really interesting stat. And looking at this graph here, when we talk about wearables, yes, there's a wrist worn, there's ones that clip on, there's clothing. This entire industry is growing. And if you follow any of the clothing wearables, that whole industry, being able to wear clothing and track my data, extremely important. This is the first step as an employer to have wearables used by my workforce. And not only does it have to be something that I want to wear, something that looks good, perhaps has different color schemes, has different form factors, something, perhaps you don't want to wear a wrist factor, you want to clip something or put it in your pocket, or wear a piece of clothing. But the other side of this is our clients have different environments. And we have clients in a manufacturing environment where you can't have smartphones, you can't have wrist-worn devices for security, for safety issues, for manufacturing flow in case that item fell into the process. So these wearables, future wearables, needs to account for different employers, different types of workplaces, and different preferences by individuals. That quote there, that's probably the most important thing. We've seen studies that wearables in their own right don't have the long distance as expected. Individuals will wear the wearables and stop using them after a short amount of time. You need more than simply having a good-looking device and tracking that data. And these 6 key areas are important to the future wearables, to making individuals use wearables for a long, sustained engagement. The first part of that is programming. A wearable by itself will not have someone keep using that wearable over a long period of time. You need programming, you need content, you need engaging games with that, you need challenges, you need a program tied to the wearable. Simply tracking my data is not a long-term successful piece for the wearables. The second one is rewards. Whether this is financial, perhaps a points game, maybe even trophies and badges, you need some sort of reward program around the use of the wearable to have that long-term engagement. The third is around personalization. So I spoke in the previous slide about different form factors, having a form factor that caters to me and the environment as well, but this takes it a step further. My display on the device needs to be personalized. I need to be able to show what I want to see on there. I need to be able to track different data points and be able to say how I'm going to track that. And the final piece of that is I need to be able to personalize my notifications. Perhaps I want to get notified every 10% of my goal. Others may want to know just simply when I hit that goal and as I exceed it. That's the personalization piece. The next is gamification. It's something really near to my heart. Having this fun, gamified experience, whether it's leaderboards and a challenge with my social network or having something more than that. You know, recently this whole VR flow with Pokemon Go and having that as engaging was very addictive. Different people have different types of engaging, gamified behaviors, but having something that's fun in there. So it's not just me tracking data and doing mundane tasks and making sure I'm hitting my steps and exercise minutes and tracking my weight, but actually having some sort of fun challenge in there or game. The fifth one is social motivation. Again, can't stress the importance of social networks and leveraging these social networks to motivate you as an individual. And wearables can do that by having encouragement from my social network and seeing leaderboards and seeing how I'm doing. And the final piece there, maybe the most important, is make it so that there are insights on that. And I mentioned that before. We're all familiar with the quantified self movement. It is continuing to grow. People are body hacking themselves to see what is the effect of the data and how to improve their health. As we move forward, as this Internet of Things continues to grow, absolutely do we need to integrate with all these sources of data, but more importantly, we need to give enlightenment to the individual on what that data is. As an example, I'm tracking my weight, sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Those are areas I need to improve. But what is the one area that I could have the most effect? As I'm looking at my data and trying different things, I don't get enough sleep by far. Maybe an extra hour of sleep is the most important. I don't know that. A system that could tell me, look at all your data and give me direction as to what's the most important thing.
Competitive generation. It was the generation of when your boss said jump, you said how high, you were the first in the morning and the last to leave at night. So they kind of started this. However, technology has not helped much. Obviously working this hard, tremendous amount of stress, both personal life and family at home as well as at work. So it leaves us to this kind of we're always on kind of work mode, right? We're always on. 81% of employees, close zero, 81% of employees say they check their work email on weekend. Show of hands, who here checks work email on weekends? Be honest. Right, no, every hand will go up probably in America, so not bad, right? What about on holiday? Right, me too, right? 55% check email on vacation. The last statistic is funny to me. 53% of employees expect response within the day. In fact, some companies actually write this into their policies, right? You have to respond to urgent emails by the end of the day. It's interesting that the instant message was created because email just wasn't fast enough, right? Right? Email's too slow, so let's IM each other. And 10 years ago, if you had said email was too slow, people would laugh at the roof. When I'm not traveling at home, when I wake up in the morning, I wake up to this bright light, 5 a.m., this bright light in our room. You know what it is? It's my wife's iPhone. 5 a.m., checking email from 5 to 6. That's her kind of downtime before the kids get out and go to school. So that's kind of her, that's stressful. That's not the way I want to wake up. I'm sure that's not the way most people want to wake up, but that's just the reality we live in. So, although technology can be blamed for this always-on scenario, it is also helpful in a new kind of programs in a fast-growing business called the well-being program. Right? I'm going to build this out real quick. You think about at Virgin Pulse, we have this kind of well-being flow, right? It kind of starts with traditional well-being,